So it's not just breathing. It also comes from referring back to Keizan Zenji poem. He was a few generations after Dogen Zenji, 13th century. And part of the poem reads, he's speaking about the moon and the autumn sky and how incomparably beautiful it is. And he says that most people want to have it pure white, but he says, sweep as you will, you cannot empty the mind. So this poem led me to this saying, breath sweeps mind. And as I said before, it's not just about breathing. When the breath is actually sweeping the mind, your awareness is just breathing the sound of the breath, enjoying the sound of the breath as it actually sweeps the thoughts away in your mind. And as you continue to do it, it becomes like the sound of the wind. And actually, ultimately, what it means is that there is no self there. What I mean about there's no self there is that there's no small self, small mind, meaning the identity of who this person is. It's an empty mind. And because it's an empty mind, it identifies and merges with the big mind, the big universe itself. So there we have it. Breath sweeps mind. And also I want to say something about the ear and listening, hearing. And my sense and feeling is that it is the most ancient and archaic function of all of our senses, because it's never closed. Even when we're sleeping, the ear remains open. The only thing that closes it is our mind, our thinking mind. We close it because what we hear is noise. But actually, when we accept it, when we don't close it, when we remain open, the noise transforms into sound. And here we are again. The breath sweeps the mind. It's the sound of the breath. And also here is your liberation. And also in this talks, I would suggest that the format is that I ring the bell 3 times and we sit for maybe a few minutes at least, and we end the sitting, the silent sitting, with a bell. The beginning and end of each section. And I would suggest, if it's at all possible, that when you listen, you honor this listening, you honor the self and these talks in the sense of not doing something else while you're listening. Not driving a car, not doing your nails, etc. Just listening and enjoying the sound. And one more thing about listening to these Zen talks is that it's not information or feeling or ideas that you do not know, even though they may have Buddhist terms, but it is something that you already know. It is something, Dharma is something that exists not outside yourself, but that you intrinsically, inherently have already. So this is how we listen, not to learn something, but to uncover what we already have. So this is how I would suggest we listen to these talks. So a few words about the Buddha himself. And before we talk about, well, the word Buddha, Bud, means to awaken. The root word Bud, where Buddha comes from. And also, in our tradition and history, he was the seventh Buddha. So there were also 6 Buddhas before him. So it's a symbolic gesture that this truth or this Dharma was always there before Buddha. So I think this is quite significant for the Dharma. And so even as we're speaking about this, even though maybe there was never a Buddha, there would be Buddhas after no Buddhas. In other words, what I'm saying is that this Dharma that we're talking about, or this Zen that we're talking about, is forever. It was never created and not changing. So in 1993, I had a chance to go to India, and I saw Buddha's birthplace, and I saw Varanasi, which is 5,000 years old, Benares now, along the river, the Ganges River, and I saw the conditions people lived in. You can't imagine until you go to India the poverty and the, well, right now it's the homeless, and the suffering people experience every day. No electricity, no water, food, etc. And Buddha actually, when he was born, he was raised as a prince. And his father, who was the king of the Shakya family, and even when you go to India, especially northern India now, you can see people with still the clan name Shakya. Also a little bit about his mother. His mother's name is Maya. And it may seem negative feeling because Maya means delusion. But enlightenment comes from delusion. We're enlightened by our delusion so that they are not separate. We can't say that one is better, but of course they are dependent on each other, enlightenment and delusion. So that's a very interesting name for a Buddha's mother to have. She's the mother of Buddha. Delusion is the mother of enlightenment. So he was born into a kingdom, a palace of luxury, and he had everything. And it's kind of interesting because he had everything, he realized there must have been something else. Ordinarily, because we don't have everything, we start questing. But because he had everything, it led him to this quest. And one time he was outside of the palace walls and he saw something that moved him on his quest. He saw birth, old age, sickness, and death. And those 4 things left a very deep, deep mark on his being. And so at the age of 29, he left the palace and proceeded to do all kinds of practices and visit all kinds of teacher ascetic practices and religions at that time, but nothing satisfied his question. So the question regarding birth, old age, sickness, and death was never answered as he continued his search. So he decided just to sit down for 6 years of intensive practice. In the final years, he decided just to sit in one place. And the place that he sat down is still exists to this very day. And when you go there, there's a Bodhi tree that has been also planted again. It's over maybe 1,500 years old from Ceylon. But the feeling in that environment is quite amazing. It just echoes of his energy and strength and realization. In fact, that area, when I was there in 1993, almost seems it could be like 2,600 years ago, nearly 2,600 years ago now, except for the telephone wires and things like that. And it's said that the Bodhi tree leaves fall at the time of his realization. So you can imagine as he sat through the night of December the 7th into the morning of December the 8th. And when he saw the morning star, and the morning star saw him, he became the Buddha, the awakened one. And at the same time, all the leaves of the trees fell. It must have been a beautiful, beautiful moment. So this is how this all began. And after his realization, he did a walking meditation around the tree in respect to the tree that sheltered him, in respect to the earth, the great Mother Earth. And he went to, after a few weeks, he went to Sarnath. It's called Deer Park, where he met the 5 ascetics who he started to search with. And that was the first time he turned the Dharma wheel. His age now was 35 years old. So his realization led to the Four Noble Truths. And dukkha, the origin, the second noble truth, the origin of dukkha. The third noble truth, ending of dukkha. And 4, the eightfold path. It's really difficult to translate what dukkha means. And suffering is a common translation, pain, sorrow, misery. But also, in a very deeper sense, it's imperfection, impermanence, emptiness, insubstantiality. So the sense is that if we continue to say suffering and leave out impermanence or emptiness, it may just seem very pessimistic, but there's much more deeper meaning behind it than that. So, with the origin of suffering, and with the realization or the wisdom that it is founded on the false idea of self, which separates us from reality. And to say that there's an ending to the suffering is a great, great gift that we all possessed. And first of all, each sentient being must realize that they were suffering, and that there is emptiness and there is impermanence. And when they realize that, then a quest can begin. But if you don't realize that, then you're just remain in the sphere of ignorance, and your life just continues that way. But if you have a chance in this brief life of ours to cross the Dharma, and you realize that life is not just suffering, but joy, pain, sorrow, happiness, and impermanency, change, and insecurity. But if we can be comfortable and realize what's behind all those things, what's behind the idea of self, then there's a great liberation from that. And of course, this goes to the Eightfold Path, which is each word has the word right in front of it, but it doesn't mean right as opposed to wrong. It's just kind of an uprightness, a natural uprightness, right understanding, right thought, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration, which is samadhi or meditation. So these are the four noble truths in the Eightfold Path. And it gives us a background for everything that appears to us in the foreground. Last year on Sonoma Mountain, when we studied the Sandokai, and the Sandokai was written by Sekitoki Sen, called the Stonehead Roshi in China. And the Sandokai means the intimacy of the absolute and the relative. And that's, the absolute is Ri, and the relative is Ji. And at the same time, Ri is one, Ji is many. Ri again is the background for everything. And Ji is the foreground, all the things that we see in front of ourselves. In fact, when I'm talking right now, this is Ji. Mostly everyone in the whole world functions from Ji, and that they're just ignorant or had never wondered, where does the origin of all this come from? Actually, I think everyone has wondered that. It's only quite natural for a human being to wonder that. I can't help but believe that human beings, all human beings, at least once in their lifetime, have walked out in the evening, at nighttime, and looked at the black, deep black sky, pitch black sky, and saw the many stars. At night, on the mountain, Sonoma Mountain here, when I'm walking home, you cannot help but think about when you see the dark sky lit by the stars, you cannot help but think about, where does this all come from? It's a natural process. You can't help but being curious, at least at that point. And then somewhere we become distracted and we lose track of that wonder or curiosity, and we get lost. So everything we see, everything that we hear, everything that we touch, smell, taste, think is all Chi. In fact, this talk is Chi, so it doesn't mean very much. Just like right now, there are stars in the sky. but we can only see as far as our eyes can reach. When we go further, we see that the background is just empty space. The Heart Sutra also deals with this. The Heart Sutra is what we could call the Buddha Dharma in a nutshell. Buddha Dharma is like the Buddha's teaching in a nutshell. There's only about 364 characters to express the essence of the Buddha Dharma. You could say that it's a very concise version of hundreds and thousands and volumes of this, in Sanskrit, Prajnaparamita Heart Sutra. So in this sutra, Buddha's teaching, it's a discussion between Avalokiteshvara, who's the Bodhisattva of mercy and compassion, and Shariputra, who is one of the 10 leading disciples of Buddha and was well known for his scientific mind and the way he could analyze things. When Avalokiteshvara was practicing Zazen, he or she saw clearly that the 5 conditions are empty. Empty is a very important word. Empty of what? What, who is empty? Seeing the 5 conditions means ourselves. A form, or human form, sensation, or perception, volition, and discrimination. This one creates karma and consciousness. These are the 5 conditions that make up a human being. Form, sensation, perception, discrimination, and consciousness. So, just in short, like in Zazen practice, each of these 5 skandhas, or 5 conditions that make up us, are suspended when you're meditating, and they are not interacting. And each one of them is also pure, purity in itself, except for one, and that's discrimination. That's the one that creates karma. But when they're separated, they're not interacting, so no karma is being created. If someone walks into a room, we don't know it's John, but we sense, almost like an animal, we sense there is a person. We don't know that John is wearing a blue sweater, but we sense the person walking in. We have the feeling of the person walking in. But when these are interacting, then we know, we can identify that's John and he's wearing a blue sweater. So in meditation practice, we're suspending the 5 skandhas, which make up the self. So therefore, the self is not existing, you could say, and not creating karma, at least a false idea of self. These are the 5 conditions. And this is the G part. The Re part is that he or she saw that all 5 conditions are empty. So if you were to continue with this investigation, you would find ultimately there's nothing behind the self. This is the investigation. Empty can be described as looking into space. There's nothing to see. There's nothing to grasp. In fact, they say the highest of the Buddha Sutras is that the most sublime, subtle sight is that there is no thing to see. When we look into a pond, we see the fish. But actually, what we see first is the space. And then we see the water. And then we see the fish. This is the same with all objects and things. But most people are interested in Ji. They don't see the Ri. The Ri is the space, the embracing, pervasive space that's unborn, that has no center, no beginning, and no end. It's everywhere. It cannot perish because it was never created. Everything perishes within time, within kalpas. A kalpa is like a heavenly being dressed in gowns, silk gowns, coming down from heaven and touching a mountain, Seisanoma mountain, with its sleeve. And every time it comes down and touches the mountain, when the mountain is finally worn away, is one kalpa. So that's a long time. That's a kalpa. Everything perishes within time, within kalpas and kalpas. Everything will perish, but space will continue forever. It's unceasing. It was never created. This is what Avalokiteshvara realized. I think that when you have your first realization, you will be under the same conditions, describing the unconditional. When you see a tree, the first thing you see is the space, but it's sublime. Our G mind is quick because we've been conditioned, not just in our lifetime, but 40, 50, 60 years, but for all the previous generations. For thousands of years, we have been upholding G. That's our world of reality. And it causes great suffering, great misgiving, and great misdeeds. Here's Ji in contrast to a baby who's trying to walk, learning to walk. And the baby is bundled with diapers, and the baby is crawling, but at the same time, the baby knows this is Ri. The baby knows. And the baby with its hands and feet stands up. But because its stability is not strong, it falls down. The baby doesn't say to itself, because I fell down 3 times, I'm not going to stand up anymore. But this is what we say. We say this to ourselves because we have the G mind. The baby goes on because it's just like the river longing to return to the ocean. The river longs to return to the ocean. So it continues. So there's another thing which Buddha discovered, and it's karma. And karma mainly means action. And in the Heart Sutra, we've translated it as discrimination or volition. So this discrimination or volition action is subject to karma, and it comes from the idea of a false self. The self as being separate from reality, into what I said before, like the Ri and the Ji. Everything that we see and touch and think and believe in the material world is separate from reality. So the question remains, or the question goes, but I do have eyes, I do have ears, I do have nose, and there are trees, and there is the sky and the mountains. But in the Heart Sutra again, it says that there's no eyes, no ears, no tongue, no nose. So this negation is asking us to find out what is behind all of this. So the search leads to this one point. Even karma, the law of cause and effect, has to return to the great reality. Everything goes back. Everything comes forth. Everything goes back to the same place over and over and over again. And karma is the continuation of energy, a tremendous amount of energy. And another question arises is that if there's no self, who would be the person with karma, even after death? So it's the accumulation of energy and force that continues the continuity of this energy and force that continues life after life after life. So the word nirvana means extinction, means the extinction of this force. So in a sense, we have this one chance in our brief lifetime to confront this and to be free of this karma. It's not that karma is a punishment or a law or some kind of justice. It's a natural law of observation of what happens over and over and over again until we realize that through our ignorance, go beyond our ignorance, that we see what is actually happening. How maybe our karma, personal karma, manifests in our children. How it manifests into the many thousand different things if we don't realize it. And the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, another name for it is called the Middle Way. And the middle way means not something in between, but it means something that transcends the good and the bad, all the polarities, all the dualities. So we can be free, just in between, not in the middle, but something that actually transcends so that there is a cessation or an end to suffering. So we end with a meditation again.